Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So once again, I'm filming this video before the previous podcast is even out. So if it ends up being that there's like certain things you've asked and I'm not addressing it in this video, that's why. But it's just, I've currently got like a backlog of things that I want to talk about because of the period earlier this year where I wasn't filming. And so it's kind of like catching up with that, but I'm still knitting at the same time. So it's just, there's a lot of things to talk about. And this video specifically is hopefully, if everything works out, it should be the last time that I kind of have to talk about, oh, I started this like earlier in the year and I never showed it to you, but it's finished now. We should hopefully after this video be back in the normal swing of things, of showing you things that I've started, then maybe showing it again as a whip in another video, and then eventually showing it finished. So yeah, this should be the last time that I'm like, this is new and I've never shown it to you and it's done now. But it does mean that I have a lot of finished objects for this video that I have never talked about, and nearly all of the whips that I'm showing you are new. So, because otherwise I was like, I could kind of spread it out a bit more, but then things just get a bit muddled, and I was like, nope, let's just do this. This is just kind of a video of all the new things, plus a few old ones. So, what I'm wearing. This, I've worn this before in a video. This is the No Sweatshirt by Park Williams that I tested last year before, I can't even remember, and I used Holst Coast held double in the colour, I think it's Old Gold. So it's a cotton wool blend, and it's a very thin yarn, which is why I held it double for this gauge, so that it would actually have like a bit of oomph to it. And it's knit inside out, so the purl stitches are all on the outside, but so you don't have to purl everything. You knit it inside out, so you just are knitting a normal kind of like Raglan jumper, and it's got a hood as well and the drawstrings, and then you turn it inside out later. You don't have to, but that is the design. And at first I wasn't sure if I wanted to go with that because I'm not normally a huge fan of like the purl texture. I think it can often just be a bit too much, but I actually really love this. And I've gotten a lot of wear out of it when it's been cold enough for it. And I really want to make another one. I'm just not sure what colour I'd want to make next, because for me this colour is quite a neutral colour, so I can wear it with most things. And like when I first thought about like, oh, I might do another one, I was like, oh, it should be grey or it should be black. And then I was like, do I really want that though? Because normally like with sweatshirts and hoodies and things, grey is like, you know, the classic. But I don't know, it might be a bit boring to knit. So I'm still not sure. Still need to have a think about it and keep pulling my own hair out of it. But it was a lot of fun to knit and quite easy. The only thing is with holding it double, there's a few places, like one of them's like right at the front. Yeah, you can see it, where I didn't manage to catch one strand of the Holst Coast, and that's just a problem when you're holding something double or multiple strands, that yeah, you might not catch everything in every single stitch, and then when you are wearing it inside out or wrong side out or purl side out, let's put it that way, you're going to be able to see those stitches. So it's not a problem. I've never had an issue with it getting caught on anything. And I think with time it might just like start to like felt in place a bit. But it doesn't bother me all that much. And yeah, like I said, I would love to make another one. I am so happy that it is finally cold enough for me to wear something cozy, not just when I'm filming, but just in general, because July was so unbelievably hot here in Austria, and now that we've hit August, it was also quite hot, but we've had about maybe a week where it's just been a bit rainy, a bit cloudy, and it's only ever really gotten up to like 22 degrees. Oh, and I love it. I'm not a summer person, I will say time and time again. I do like sunshine, but I don't like the heat. So, sun, but cool, a little bit of wind occasionally. I love rain. That's what I like. And so I just like being cozy and comfy, and warm weather does not allow for that. I like blankets, I like tea, and that's all kind of like taken away. I'll drink iced tea, but it's not the same. There's not that cozy factor, it's more refreshing. Yeah, so that's what I'm wearing, and I'm feeling very snuggly, but it's not, because I think the blend is like 55% cotton, so I think there's more cotton than wool in this yarn, and that does just mean that it's quite comfortable. Like, it still would never be like a summer jumper, but it kind of is wearable in the transitional kind of periods, and well, it is summer right now and I'm wearing it. So yeah, so for me personally, someone who doesn't like being warm, like I doesn't like being hot, let's put it that way. I like being warm, but I'd always prefer it to be cold than hot. And this is comfortable to wear when it's about like 20 degrees. Yeah. And the more I talk about this and the more I've been wearing it the last few days, I really, really want to make another one. I don't think I might have yarn for it in stash, but it would be using yarn that I've got planned for a different project. I could potentially try and use Nutiden, because I've got quite a bit of Nutiden where I don't have a specific project in mind. I just not sure I'd want this in Nutiden. It's been so cozy and comfy because of the blend of this yarn, and so I think I'd like to stick with something that's a bit more light and summery, so it doesn't have to be cotton. It could be, you know, a merino linen blend could be nice, or like silk or something. I'm getting distracted. But yeah, so that's what I'm wearing today. I'm feeling very comfy and cozy. No cup of tea because I think that would push me over the edge and I'd be too warm. But like I said, I have a lot of finished objects. Nearly all of them are new. You've only, I think, seen one before. And yeah, most of the things I'm showing that are whips, I think there's only two that you've seen before. So apologies if that's annoying. That is sadly the state of things right now. Let's start with this one here. So back in like 2020, 2021, with lockdown and everything, bought some, I think like quite a lot of people bought quite a bit of yarn online and didn't always have a specific project in mind. It was just kind of like, oh, that is such beautiful yarn. And normally with fingering weight yarn, I have a lot of ideas of what I can do with like one skein. If I have two, it's like there's so many options. But I had bought some DK yarn, which I don't buy all that often, especially hand dyed. And if I buy one, I'm like, okay, cool. That's going to be either it will be socks or it will be like a hat. But I bought two skeins of two different colours from two different dyers, and I had sort of been like, oh, it should be enough for a t-shirt. And I kept looking for patterns and was like, no, that's not really what I want, and that probably won't be enough. And I just never did anything with the yarn because I never found what I thought would be the perfect project for it. So then this is kind of like just what most of my year has been like so far. I've been really inspired to use my old yarn and to use my stash and to kind of just go for it and not worry about the perfect project and think more about what am I just feeling right now. And I knew I wanted a t-shirt with this yarn, and so eventually I was just like, instead of trying to find another pattern, I was like, I'm going to do what I have been doing this year, and let's just go for a basic raglan. Like, that is the easiest, especially top down, to modify so it fits. I can, you know, go long sleeve, short sleeved, longer body, shorter body, and I can use as much of the yarn as possible. So that is what I did. I used the Cozy Classic Raglan pattern. Are you sick of me mentioning that pattern? Because I feel like every video I'm like, and I've cast on another one and another one. I think it is my most knit pattern. And I did it short sleeved because, like I said, I had 4 skeins of DK yarn in total. And I did these stripes, which are 10 rounds, I think. And decided to start with this darker colour, which is Rock Gnome by the Corner of Craft on her Sturdy DK, so it's a BFL. And then this lighter, more speckled colour is from Ducky Darlings and it's called Viva Viola and is on a merino, I think it's merino nylon. And so it is like 2 different sheep breeds, and you can feel the difference a bit, but I'm comfortable with BFL. I actually prefer BFL to merino. I like the slight toothiness and grippiness a bit more. And yeah, use the pattern mainly just to cast on. And I think once again, like I've done before, I cast on for a smaller size because I wanted it to be a bit more like tight fitting at the top and not too wide and open. And then after working the ribbing at the top in the Rock Gnome colour, I then decided for the short rows I would start the stripe. So I said that each stripe is 10 rounds, but that isn't true at the beginning. So you can see here that this stripe is much bigger than the other ones, and that's because I worked it so that I did the short rows and then work the stripe until the front here was 10 rows. Rounds, I should say, at this point. Just because I was like, I could, you know, do the short rows in this Viva Viola colour until the back is 10 rows. Yeah, 10 rounds, whatever. But then I'd have this awkward thing where at the front, this colour would creep in a bit and would maybe get to the front here, but then I'd already be starting the Rock Gnome colourway and have it really close to the collar. So I thought, okay, if I have a wider stripe at the back, well, you're less likely to see that. One, I can't see it at all because it's on my back. Other people might be able to, but I typically wear my hair down, so it doesn't matter. And do I care that it's a wider stripe? No. So it is also a little bit wider, like going into the front here because of the short rows. But it does mean that the whole thing, like the stripes are like straight. I don't know how to describe that. Because if I hadn't done it this way, yeah, I would just have like a little bit of a stripe here, which would then disappear. So I think this was just the best way of kind of solving a potential issue. Either way would have been fine. I'm happy I did it this way. And I then worked the body until I thought the yoke was deep enough, so I didn't use the pattern anymore. I did use it for the short rows, but didn't use it for raglan increases, so I think I'm like between 2 sizes. And then after splitting body and sleeves, I then went and immediately worked the sleeves so I could put the rest of the yarn into the body. And in some ways I would have liked the sleeve to be like a little bit longer, but because I wanted all of the ribbing to be in this Rock Gnome colorway, I would have had to do not just 1 extra stripe, which is what I would have wanted. I would have had to do 2 extra stripes to be able to get back to the Viva Viola color so I could end in the Rock Gnome color. So I was like, nope, I'd rather have shorter sleeves, because with 2 extra stripes it would be this odd kind of like not long enough and not short enough, and I was like, let's leave it as it is. And then I made the body kind of as long as I could, so it's not super long, but it is the kind of perfect length that for t-shirts that I currently like to wear with jeans. I used to wear very long t-shirt with jeans and then slowly started to realize that I felt more comfortable in tops that were just like a little bit, they're not, I wouldn't say they're cropped, I guess they sit kind of more on my hip bone, maybe a little bit higher than that, and that's what this kind of length is. So yarn wise, I could have made it a bit longer if I wanted. It would have been a potential gamble. So this is the Gnome colorway, so you can see I don't have a load left of this, and I have more of the Viva Viola. So maybe I could have gotten out 10 rounds more of each. The Gnome colorway is the one I'd be worried about with that. But I then kind of decided, I was like, it's at a good length. Adding 2 more stripes would have probably made it too long. And just an extra stripe, like with the sleeves, would have been better. And I was like, nope, let's leave it. And this can just go into my scraps for the Battenberg blanket, because I'm using DK scraps for that. And it'll be nice to have a few more colours. Especially something a bit more neutral. I don't have, especially like hand-dyed, I nearly never buy neutrals. So it'll be nice to have something a bit more subtle in that blanket. So those will go in there. And I haven't woven in the ends, and I haven't blocked it because it was, by the time I finished it, it was starting to get warm already. And so I was like, I just couldn't be bothered. The classic thing of, I finished it and now it goes and lives in the bag with all the finished projects. And at some point what I need to do, and I normally do this a couple of times a year, is I just have like this huge day or week sometimes of weaving in all my ends and blocking thing after thing until I'm through all of them, so that I can actually wear them. Because though this kind of more dreary, cooler weather is exactly what I want, it's not going to stick around. I know it's going to get warmer again, and so I won't get to wear this for a while anyway. But, you know, come end of September and October time, it could be the time to whip this out. So it'd be nice if it was ready to go, instead of me then having to weave in the ends and block it then. So I need to do it soon. But the annoying thing is I made the choice to always snip the ends, as in like cut the colorway instead of dragging it up or down through my work, because the stripes were too wide. And so it's a lot of ends to weave in, which is fine. I just need to, I actually quite enjoy weaving in ends. It's just something I have to commit to, because otherwise if I'm sitting down, I'm like, oh, I could be knitting. Let's do some knitting instead of that. So once I commit to it though, it's not a problem. So that's the first thing. Something that you have seen before, and I think this is the only thing I've ever shown off before, is a test knit that I did for Iris back towards the beginning of the year. I started this. I think this is like the second test knit that I've done this year, because I'm trying to drastically reduce how often I test knit. And yeah, I'd shown it off before where the body was nearly done. So I forgot to look up how to pronounce this again, because it's named after like a place in the UK, which I didn't know at the time when I started testing this. I think it's pronounced Bedruthan, like the name of the pattern, and I think I'll make sure the name is actually down below, because I think it was called something else before. I can't remember. It did end up being the camisole, or if it ended up being something else, but anyway. So the inspiration is the Bedruthan steps, so this is why the v-neck at the front, if I can show it off, has these little garter sections, and so it creates like little steps. And that is what really drew me to the design. I thought it was beautiful. I am not really a singlet wearer. I will wear them under other things, but as just like, even in summer, if I get really hot, I don't like just having so much skin out just makes me uncomfortable. So if it gets really hot and I'm at home, I will sometimes throw on a singlet, but it's not my favorite. Even if I'm home alone, it's not about being seen by other people. I just don't feel comfortable. But I was like, oh, but this one's so pretty and it'll be nice. So I have worn this already because it is now washed and blocked. And if you'd watched the episode where I showed this off the first time, it was like scrunched up because it's 2x2 ribbing. And yeah, with blocking, this yarn is just unbelievable. Like, you can see the drape. That's because it's 100% tencel. But with blocking, this thing was amazing. So it was knit from the top down. And I've talked about the construction before. It wasn't the easiest, but once you kind of made note of specific things which are mentioned in the pattern, it wasn't tricky at all. And to be honest, the thing I actually found the hardest was finishing the body. Not like challenging from like a technique point of view, but literally just because of how long you have to knit it, or how long I needed to knit it so it would fit me. And the 2x2 rib, and I had to use 2.5mm needles to get gauge. So it was a challenge to get through this. I did manage to finish before the end of the test knit. The test knit ended up being like extended a little bit further, and I really needed that time. But it was, it was an enjoyable knit up until the body. From then on, it was literally just, I'm just knitting this so I can, 1, finish it for the test knit, and 2, so I can have it to wear. And when we've had some really hot days in July, I will say it was nice to wear this because it feels really nice and cool and light on the skin. And at the bottom, instead of doing like a different ribbing, you continue the same 2x2 ribbing, but you do a split hem, and that just helps the whole thing like sit better down there. And the yarn that I've used is from Self-Made. The brand is Fraya, and I think the like blend or base, whatever you want to call it, is called Soothing, but it's been discontinued now from what I've been able to find. And which is in some ways a shame, because I think it is a beautiful yarn, especially once it's been blocked. But apparently, because I went back to Self-Made at some point to buy some fabric, because I've been doing quite a bit of sewing, which I'll hopefully share in a video in the future. I don't know, it feels weird to talk about my sewing when all I've ever done is talk about my knitting, but I would like to share it. But I went back to Self-Made, and they had like a pack of the yarn in like different colors, where it was like you got 10 skeins of it, you couldn't buy them separately. And it was heavily reduced, and it kind of said that it has a tendency to pill. So I think that's why they've discontinued it. I haven't noticed any pilling, but that's because I've only worn it like 2-3 times. And I think also with the kind of design it is, because you haven't got sleeves, there isn't like fabric rubbing on fabric. And so I think with it being like my bare skin, like from my arms rubbing against this, if it does have a tendency to pill, I think it will be very slow because of that minimal friction. Now, if I wear something over this, I think that could then cause it to pill quicker. So I don't know about the pilling issue yet, but in some ways it doesn't matter whether I recommend this yarn or not. You can't get it. Unless it is, there might be a chance that some stores are still selling it. I couldn't see it online. It was only in store that they had these like packs made up. And I did make the choice, even though I had like the warning on there, to get some more because of how nice it is. And I just, once I've got a bit more wear out of this and do notice that there is a pilling tendency, I'll just have to be a bit more careful when I plan what to do with the other yarn. But yeah, so that one is done and has been worn. Then 2 things that are a bit different, but sort of just in line with my goals where I never made a video. I'm trying to use up like a lot of people, trying to work more with my stash yarn and get through it, but for me, I'm specifically trying to focus on scraps this year. I've talked about this before. I don't feel overwhelmed by my yarn stash. I feel overwhelmed by my yarn scraps because I've used them for what they were planned for. So now I'm like, well, now I have this yarn and I have no idea what I'm meant to do with it. It's a small quantity often. And so I've just been trying to kind of think a bit more and spend more time actually looking through my scraps and thinking like, do I think this could be useful for color work? Do I think I could maybe use it for socks? Is there some other way I can kind of incorporate it? So that's why, like, I've got the cozy scrappy raglan, as I'm calling it, my lento and things like that, just to try and use my scraps, not just to get rid of them, but to get something out that I really love. And so this is kind of how these next two projects came about. I have from Wool and the Gang, which is like the first yarn I ever really bought, because I love the kits, I love the convenience of it, and to be honest, most of the yarn is good, it's just pricey. But I had quite a bit of the shiny happy cotton, happy shiny cotton, I never remember which way around it goes, in a variety of different colours, left over from projects, but then also I had bought a kit for like a yoga top, so it was like a very loose gauge for the yarn. The cotton is like an Aran weight, roughly, and so it's quite thick. It was then in this top knit at a very open gauge, and it just didn't look great. It was also before I realised kind of how to make things fit better, so I had knitted to the recommended length. It was way too short, like it's not even, it wasn't even cropped on me, it was like barely covering anything. And I then just eventually decided, I think after I'd left York, all my stuff had arrived here in Austria, I made the decision to frog most of the things that I'd made, like kit-wise, with my Wool and the Gang yarn. And now I'm slowly trying to repurpose that yarn so it doesn't just sit around. And this is one of the things I decided to do. So this is called the Heel Stitch Hand Towel and is a free pattern by Pearl Soho. So it is just 100% cotton. I made a little like hand towel, dish towel, whatever you want to use it for. And this has already been used and washed, which is why it's kind of like oddly scrunched up. I do find this yarn is nicer before washing, which is frustrating. But it's just this kind of like slip stitch pattern that, you know, you often do for heels on socks, hence the name of the pattern. And I think I used a different weight yarn than what was recommended. And then I just changed the needle size, cast on a number of stitches that worked with the pattern, and then kind of held it up and was like, yeah, it's wide enough. And then just worked it until I thought the length was good, and finished off with a little I-cord bit, which I then sewed down. And so this was actually something I made for my mom, just kind of spontaneously. I was like, she's made me and a couple of other family members like hand towels and dish towels, and I was like, but no one ever makes it for my mum. So that's why I made her this one. And she used it while it was here, but it's living here now, so she has one whenever she's visiting. And it was a lot of fun to do, worked up really quickly, and I really like this colour, I have to say, and I have plenty more of it. So I finished that one and was like, well, that barely got through any of that yarn. So I decided, okay, well, what else could I make? I don't want to do exactly the same one because I was like, I don't want to get bored. So I went on Pearl Soho, found another kind of like dish hand towel, and this one is called the Colorfield hand towel. And it looks like this. So it is done. I just haven't woven in the ends. I'm not going to wash it or block it. It can just be ready to use, but I have to weave in the ends first. And this is done in linen stitch in 2 colours at some points. Which, like, linen stitch is quite easy. It can take a while to work up because it's like brioche, where to actually work like a proper row or round, you have to do 2 repeats. So it grows relatively slowly, but with linen stitch, to make sure it's not too tight and dense, you do have to use quite big needles for the weight of yarn that you're using. So it's kind of like it goes quickly, but it also goes slowly. And the like 2-color aspect of this hand towel was a nice change, and technically speaking, very easy to do. The only thing that was tricky was I always had to check the pattern of how do you start the row and how do you finish it. Because it includes very specific instructions where I eventually figured out the reason they're being so picky about what you do with which yarn color is so that you get this nice finish on the edge. So if you ignore that, the instructions in the pattern, then you don't get that. I know Knitting Traditions has made a couple of these before, or at least one, and I think she's also recently finished a pillow where she did the same sort of 2-color thing all over for a pillow, and it looks beautiful. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to do, and once again I just cast on a certain number of stitches and was like, that looks good, and just did it until the length what I thought would be done, added an I-cord loop again, and yeah. It feels so nice, and I love doing linen stitch. Might have to cast on another one. But I'll probably use a different yarn just because I don't want to get too bored of this too quickly. But yeah, I can highly recommend those patterns if you're looking for something like that. And I still have this much left of the cotton, so it's more than 100 grams. And for the second colour that I used for the other one, also still have a decent amount left. But then I've also got this little scrap. So almost an entire ball, a little scrap, and I think I have another ball of this cotton somewhere else as well. Never ending, but it's kind of nice that I can then spontaneously cast on something like this and make something really practical and useful out of it. So love those. And then another test knit that I did this year, which was for the Knit Pearl Girl, was for the Crescendo Summer top. So this is what it looks like. I tested it the Crescendo blouse, which is I think it's slightly thicker, gauge-wise. And the big difference as well is obviously the blouse has longer sleeves, and it also has more repeats. This lace pattern goes down further. But this pattern originally went through testing at some point last year, I think it was. And I originally wanted to test it, but I had too many test knits going on. But then it got put on hold. And then I was part of the second round of testing, because I think the feedback from the first group of testers was to do with this pattern going too far down and then being a bit too revealing. Because the Crescendo sweater and the Crescendo blouse both are either with mohair or kind of thicker yarn and more fluffy yarn, but because this is meant to be a summer top, a lot of people were using things like silk or cotton. I used Holst Coast again, this time in the color Lavender, held double still, like with this one. And so I do have a little bit of a halo from the yarn content, but it's not a lot. And so I can see why people would say having this lace pattern too low would be really revealing when it wasn't for the other versions of this pattern. And it was a shorter test knit because we didn't have to do everything. We had to finish the yoke and one sleeve, I think it was. And that's mainly what I got through. I think I maybe did both sleeves and then had a couple of inches for the body, but that was all I managed to do in the time period that we had, and that was absolutely fine. And then slowly I just kept knitting on the body and eventually got to the ripping and cast this off, and haven't washed it or blocked it and haven't woven in the ends. But it's once again because it's not the weather for it. Today, technically, but that was sort of unexpected. This is not a summer piece for Austria. This is very much a spring, autumn kind of thing. And lengthwise, this is also about the same as the Cozy Classic Tee that I showed you. that I should sit at about my hips, because the like yoke depth is quite small. So I've tried it on. It will probably like relax a little bit with washing and blocking, but the like splits, it's very far in my armpit. And it's a little bit uncomfortable. That is sort of how it was designed. It is meant to be a shorter yoke. I do think I would have preferred it just a little bit deeper. I would like to make another one in a more summer yarn, and I would then also, after finishing like the repeats of the lace chart and the increases, I would then maybe add like an inch, maybe a bit more, to the yoke without increasing, just to get that opening a bit bigger, and so it doesn't sit so close on my skin. But I think it's really beautiful, and once it's been like washed and blocked, this is all gonna just sit a lot nicer. And yeah, definitely see myself making another one, just like I want to make another blouse. I want to get to the sweater at some point. It was a lot of fun to knit. Once again, it was a drag with the body. I'm noticing more and more that stockinette in the round isn't the nicest thing for me, because it's fine if I have like, if I'm having a conversation with someone online, in person, anything like that, where it's nice to have something in my hands and to keep knitting. But if I'm actually like having knitting time, it's not enjoyable. It's too boring. And after like a couple of rounds, I'm just like, oh, I still have to do the same thing, and it's just not my favorite. But it's always worth it at the end. So yeah, once again, adding to the to be blocked pile, which is ever growing. So that was a test that I did. Then something I kind of spontaneously cast on one day in June, I think it was another Ranunculus. So I've made, I think, only one so far, and this is my second one now. But I had bought some yarn while I was still living in Germany from Hema. It was a Eucalyptus yarn, and it was like an Aran weight. So I knew it was like a summer yarn, but very thick. But I was kind of like, yeah, but it could be kind of like a layering piece in summer, like if it gets a little bit colder in the evening, that you could wear this. And yeah, so I bought it specifically to make the Ranunculus, and I have, and you can't see the pattern because it's black yarn. But I'm sure you all know what the Ranunculus looks like, but you can probably see it a bit better. Sort of. It looks awful. But yeah, so it's just a lot of like texture and lace. And in person, you can actually see it quite well. It just doesn't pick up on camera. And I made it short sleeve because I didn't have a lot of yarn. And I think it really was that I separated the body and the sleeves and then just did the ribbing. I didn't do any extra rounds, which is a different to what's written in the pattern, but that's how I did it previously before. But I think for my first one, I knitted a few rounds and then did the ribbing. I was like, nope, not enough yarn. And once again, I made the body as long as I could. And I think this is a little bit shorter than the other tops. So this very much would be like with something that is high-waisted. Whereas the other ones I can get away with just kind of wearing my normal jeans and trousers. But it did turn out exactly as I wanted, where it's kind of a light-ish piece, but a little bit more warmth and a little bit of coverage without it being like too much. And it has actually been washed and blocked. Unfortunately, normally I do it that I weave in my ends and then I block my projects and then I snip the ends off. But I finished this while my mum was here, and she was really kind and blocked it, not knowing that I hadn't woven in the ends and normally do it that way. So it's technically speaking ready to wear. I just need to actually weave in the ends, and I don't feel motivated now because it's already washed and blocked. But I'm going to try and get to that sooner rather than later, because we're probably slowly starting to head in the direction of the weather being okay for me to wear this. And it definitely isn't a during the day sort of thing, because if the sun is shining, I'm not going to wear black. It's more of an evening-ish piece. But really love it. It went super quick. I think I knitted the whole thing in like 2 days. And I've wanted to make it since like the end of 2021. Had the yarn. And just kept kind of going like, oh no, like I'll cast it on the future. I don't need to do it now. And now I'm really glad I have, because I used up all of the yarn. I think I had 350 grams of this particular eucalyptus yarn. And yeah, used it up until I literally nothing left. And it only took me 2 days to finish it. And now I turned something that's just been sitting in my stash into something I can wear once I weave in the ends. And chop off the ends. I will get to it. But everyone, well, not everyone, but most people seem to love the Ranunculus pattern. I do as well. I think it's incredible. I would like to make many more. And I hope at some point to make one with like a mohair and make it into like a proper oversized jumper instead of the 2 t-shirts I've made so far. And the last finished object is something I made for my trip to Ireland. So I think I've mentioned that I'm flying to Ireland later in August for my birthday, and my parents are going to meet me there. And when we'd all kind of like booked it, my mum went online, bought some yarn for herself, and also included some for me, and included 2 skeins of an Aran weight yarn. The base is called Warmi, I believe, as in like warm with an I at the end. And it's by like Armo yarns. I'll have it written below. But she bought it specifically so I could make myself like a beanie for Ireland, because I have sensitive ears. If it's even just a little bit windy, my ears hurt. I don't get an ear infection. It's just my ears become unbearably painful. And because it can, with the wind and potential rain and just the weather in Ireland, it could be quite chilly, so a beanie could be a good idea. And I was like thinking back and forth, what do I want to make, and then I remembered that I bought the top twist beanie pattern by Albina McLaughlin, and I was like, Albina McLaughlin, she's Irish, and then I'm going to be in Ireland, and it's going to be like, ooh, amazing. That's how my brain works. So I made it. It looks just like a, normal 2x2 beanie, ribbed beanie. But the really special thing about this is this twist at the top that you do. And it has a hole in the middle. So you knit this flat. You cast on half the number of stitches and work it to a certain length. You do change needle size at the beginning and at the end, so it's a little bit more cinched in. And then once you've reached the length for the entire like beanie, you put this twist in before you sew the sides up. And I've done the sides. My seaming isn't the best, but it's also, I'm happy with it. You can see the seam running. Ooh. Running down there. So it's not the neatest, but I think it will be fine when wearing it. And you leave a gap at the top, which you kind of have to because of the twist. And the reason you have this hole, or like 2 holes technically, it's on either side, is so that you can actually have a ponytail and wear a beanie. So this is something that's always annoyed me since I've had longer hair, is if it's really windy, I don't want to just put a beanie over my hair, because then these bits are still like flopping around in the wind and it gets really frustrating. And quite often it's also, I'll be wearing my hair in a ponytail already, and then I'm like, oh, it's getting a bit chilly or a bit windy, I'd like to put a beanie on. And then I have to either like put a beanie on top, which can often look like weird with the ponytail, it can feel uncomfortable, and then then you can't see any of my hair and then I look weird. Or I take my hair down and then just have to deal with like my hair then tickling me everywhere. And so now with this, I can wear my ponytail, and then if I'm like, oh, I need my hat, I can just pull the ponytail through. And you can even, if you want to, which I think is adorable, because this also comes in like kids sizes, is you can have pigtails and then just have like one sticking through on one side and one sticking through on the other. And I think that's adorable. And you can then also make the choice of it's meant to be worn slouchy, but you can obviously control it a bit by either wearing it like that or having it with like a slight brim as well. So you have that option. And yeah, really quick to knit. It's a great travel project because I used slightly less than 2 skeins of the yarn. I could have gotten away with only using 1, but I made mine a little bit longer because I've got a pretty big head. And I knew if I made it to the recommended length, I would have no slouch and it would look weird. So this is how much I have left of the second skein. It is a beautiful yarn, very soft, and the colour, which you won't really be able to see. Yeah, it's just got a lot of different kind of like colours through it to make this beautiful blue, and love it. So I can't wait to get to Ireland, and you do block this before you sew it together. I just haven't snipped my ends off yet, but that's it. It's done. Just need to snip those ends. And I plan on making another one. For a lot of Albina McLaughlin's patterns, she actually includes a little like extra PDF on how to modify or how to work the pattern if you want to use Newton instead of like the recommended or kind of normal yarn, if you will. And I really want to make a Newton version. I say a Newton version. I want multiple Newton versions because you can kind of, you'd hold 2 strands of it and then you can kind of marl a lot of different colours. You won't need a lot of the yarn, and I think it would just be beautiful. So that's all my finished objects. And now for my whips. Let's start with the old ones. And I say old, and they're not really that old because I think I only showed them off for the first time on my last video, maybe my previous one. They haven't been on my heels all that long. First of all, let's go with one that I'm really getting close to finishing because I'm really trying to get it finished. And that is the Dancing Nancies, which is a sample that I'm knitting for Laura of the Lonely Knitter. Let me just untangle all this yarn. So last time, how far was I through it last time? I think I might have actually just done like a little bit of the colorwork chart and the yoke, and that was it. If that's true, woohoo! I've been knitting on this a lot though. I have finished the yoke, and isn't it gorgeous? I posted this on Instagram and it's just, oh, it's amazing. It was a lot of effort though. This wasn't the easiest color work. This is one of those projects where I was really glad that I kind of put it on hold for a while and didn't force myself to do the colorwork chart. Because all of a sudden I had it in July, I think it was, when I was really knitting on this, where I was just addicted to doing color work and it's all I wanted to do, and I got through the color work chart really quickly, and then I did a little bit of the body, like a couple of inches, and then I was like, I need to do the sleeves so I can gauge how much yarn I have. Sleeve is done. This is sleeve number 1, so you can see there's more color work at the bottom. You actually, I said in a previous video, I was like, oh, but the sleeves will be easy, you do decreases, and then I've got the color work. You don't do decreases, you do increases. So you're increasing, then you finally do the color work. Then I had to knit until I reached the right length for the sleeve, which was like 4 inches of just in the round with a load of stitches before you do a rapid decrease and little cuff. The first sleeve was fine. It went by, and I think I did in 3 days or something, which is relatively long for me, but it had increases, so, you know, it was going to take a little longer. But the second sleeve, I couldn't really bring myself to do it. The increases, I think, alone took me like 4 days to do because I just kept putting it down and didn't want to do it. The color work was fine. I managed to get through most of this part because I think I was talking to my mum or something like that. And then the decreases and cuff go by really quickly. But yeah, the second sleeve was a bit more of a struggle. But then I had to go back to the body, stocking it in the round single colour, until I reach the right length, and I have to make the body a little bit longer because Laura wants it a little bit longer. And I decided to add a little bit length in this section, and then at the bottom before you do the ribbing there's also a bigger section of this main color. And I thought instead of just doing one of them, I'll put like an inch into each of them so it's a bit more even. But then I eventually did reach the extra length that I needed. Like I've reached the recommended, added a bit more, and I've now just done like 10 rows of color work at the bottom. I've got quite a small cable here. And I'm getting there. So there's 31 rows of color work. Then I need to do like 2 more inches of the body before I do the hem. I think that's everything. And so it's still quite a bit to do. But compared to what I've done, I'm like, we're flying. This will be done soon. And I'm hoping to try and actually get it done this week. So it is the 8th of August today when I'm filming this. I hate saying that because often it takes me so long to get these videos out, and it's so embarrassing when I mention like what the date is, but we're being open, we're being transparent, we're being honest. It's the 8th of August, and I'm hoping to finish it by the end of this week. Fingers crossed. But so that's the main project I've actually been knitting on for the last 2-3 weeks. And yarn wise, where's that extra skein? There it is. I had 3 skeins of both colours. They're from the Hocus Pocus collection from the Lonely Knitter. This contrast colour that I'm using is called Book, but like with a lot of O's. This is how much I currently have left. This is what I'm currently using for the colour work. I don't think I'll need to use this, but if I do, I've got plenty. And this is only my second skein of the main colour, which is, it's one of the Sanderson sisters. I never remember the name of this one, but I think it's an absolutely stunning colour. And I have a whole nother skein of this, which I might need. I'm not too sure. That's the one where I'm like, it could be that when I do the 2 inches of the body that I'll run out and have to wind up the 3rd skein, but I might be able to get by with this. But either way, there's no issue with yarn at all. I have plenty. I'll be able to finish it and add that extra length in, and no problem. But I'm knitting this on 3.25mm needles, which is slightly smaller than recommended. I did a gauge swatch. I'm a loose-ish knitter, typically. And I was then so into the colour work and so kind of focused with this project that I was almost a monogamous knitter, and I've done this a few times before, never to this extent. And I'd mentioned before that I was experiencing kind of like pain, and not even really my wrist, it was more just like my arm, not even really into my elbow. And I realised it was because I wasn't mixing up my projects as much as I normally would. So normally, even just within a day, I've got like 4 or 5 projects I'll work on. And so it means that I'm never working on one particular project for too long. But because I was so into this one and trying to focus on it and wanting it to get it done so I can send it to Laura, it then ended up being that I was knitting on it for so long that I was experiencing pain because it was the same yarn, the same needle size for multiple days. And occasionally I maybe picked up one other project, but that was it. And so I kind of had to take a break from it for a while. That's also why the second sleeve took me so much longer, because I forced myself to kind of stop, and I wanted to because I didn't want to do the second sleeve. And I then kind of like focused on other projects, and I'm still doing that now, of kind of limiting how much time I spend on that project. So I'll do a couple of rounds of the colour work and then put it aside and try not to go back to it until the next day. So it's a project where, as much as I want to try and get it done and work on it, I'm kind of limiting myself to picking it up once per day, and then that's it, knit on something else. Because I noticed the pain first started when I was always knitting monogamously on my Alaska sweater. My Alaska sweater, it's a sample. It's not mine, I don't get to keep it. And I was knitting mainly only on that project, and I was kind of like, I think I've got a little bit of pain, and so I took a break. And then this project kind of like replaced it, and I'm now starting to realize me having multiple projects and working on multiple things at the same time is a good thing. So I'm trying to kind of allow myself to do that. Maybe not cast on new projects all the time, but to really have multiple projects that I work on throughout the day. Another project you've seen before, which I've also made a lot of progress on, is, can't remember how to pronounce it, Luasc? Luasc? Something like that, by Albina McLaughlin. For anyone who knows how to pronounce it, I'm sorry. And if you have like hints on how to pronounce it, I've looked it up before, but I think it's just not clicking in my brain, sadly. But it's a beautiful pattern. Last time I did have the sleeves done, and I think I was just working on the body. I can't remember if I had the eye-cord done. I think I did, and the fact that it's like rolling in, which is super frustrating, and I'm hoping with blocking this will be fixed. Otherwise I need to unpick it and do it again. But I have finished both sleeves now, and I went for the option, instead of just doing a straight sleeve, I did a round of increases, which, because this is 100% linen, you can see the increases. I don't care. And then just knit it. Still a short sleeve. And then in the pattern, Albina McLaughlin recommends using a thinner yarn for when you do this like folded hem, because otherwise it gets really bulky. And so she recommends a lace weight yarn. I didn't have anything that would have worked for this, so I actually used some tin linen that I had left over from my farfa top, which is a little bit thinner than the linen that I'm using, which is Antigone from the Rerum Natura. And that's actually worked out perfectly. And I actually really like the white stripe, though you don't see it because it's inside. But yeah, when I was knitting it, I was like, oh, I quite would like that as like a little cuff on the outside now. But maybe I'll make another one in the future. So I did the second one as well. I bought 4 skeins of this yarn, even though the pattern said for like the yardage of this yarn I'd need more like 5. I was like, too expensive. It's like 17 euros per 100 grams. I was like, nope, I will make it work with 4. So I was kind of like, I'm going to do shorter sleeves anyway, and I'll just make the body as long as I can. And it's actually worked out really well. So I think I'm at the recommended length now for the full body for this pattern, but I tried it on and I do need just a little bit more length. So I've got multiple markers in here because I'm doing the like A-line version, so I've been doing increases every couple of inches. So that's what the red marker is. So I've got an increase coming up in a couple of rounds, and this golden marker here indicates when I tried it. And I want to use every little bit of the yarn, because anything I have left, it's just going to be really hard to find a project to use it in. So I was like, okay, can I make it a decent length by using all of the yarn, or am I going to get to an awkward length? So I tried it on, and so that was at this point, and from that point, if it's less than 4 inches that I get out of this yarn, perfect. The length isn't an issue. So I have like a little bit of wiggle room that within those 4 inches, with the A-line shape that it has, that it's a little bit bigger and flowier, that's kind of like the length I can aim for. And if I get to roughly 4 inches, I just have to end it there. The good thing is the hem doesn't add any length, because you just knit it until you reach the body length that you want. You do a purl round, which causes it to like fold over, and then I just have to switch back to the white tin linen that I have left over, where I had no clue what I wanted to do with this, and now I'm really glad I have it for this, and should be plenty to do the hem at the bottom, which uses up a scrap that I had no plans for. And this is how much, it looks awful, this is what happens to plant fibers, but I don't have that much left. So I think from the golden stitch marker, I might end up making it 2 inches longer than from when I tried it on, because the length it was at that point wasn't ideal. I was like, I want at least another inch, and 2 to 3 would be ideal, and 4 is getting to the point where It's still okay, but it's a little bit longer than I would have wanted, but it doesn't look awkward. So I'm almost at the point where it's the perfect length. So that should work out really nicely, and I'm just really happy that I'm going to use up all the yarn, and this should hopefully also be done this week, because then I can take it with me to Ireland, and I think this colour in Ireland is just going to be amazing. So I've been really like focused on this project as well, because it's so close to being done and I want to be able to wear it. But it's also another thing I need to be careful. Linen can be rough on the hands when I've already, had pain a little while ago. So I'm also limiting myself on how much I can knit on this, and also kind of allowing myself, typically this is the one I work on in the evening, because then I've gauged like how my arm and wrist is feeling, and then I'll kind of knit until I'm like, it's getting a bit uncomfortable. Let's stop knitting for the day. So I probably will get this amount done in 2-3 days, and then I just have a couple more days to work on the hem at the bottom. So that one's almost done as well. So those are the two you've seen before, where I'm really happy with the progress actually. And everything else is new. So let's start with this one. So another summer thing that I started a little while ago now and made quite a bit of progress on, and then it just kind of got put on hold because I had other things I wanted to knit, but I really want to get back to this one, is the Farnham Tee. So not the sweater, the tee. I got this pattern for free because of the Crescendo Summer top that I tested. And the yarn that I'm using is like the replacement for the soothing yarn that Selfmade discontinued, and this is now called Thoughtful. So it's 70% bamboo viscose and 30% silk. It's the same like weight of yarn and gauge, but it feels very different. It works up very differently. Is it the same gauge? I don't actually know if it is the same gauge now. It might not be the same gauge. I might have just told a little lie. But I saw this yarn and saw that the gauge should work out. Did a gauge swatch. Works out perfectly. And you start by knitting the back panel because it's like a drop shoulder. So you do some short rows to get an angle for the sleeve, for the shoulder. And then you work until the required length for the arm opening. And I still have a little bit to go, I think an inch and a half, and just every couple of rounds you do the stripes. And I am using 2 different colours, though the contrast just isn't that like high, and that is what I wanted. So I like low contrast, but I was also a bit limited with the colours of this yarn, and this is the one that kind of like spoke to me the most. And yeah, I just think it is very subtle, the stripes, but I don't know, I just really like it. So I haven't picked this project up in a while, just because I wasn't in the mood to knit flat, and kind of viewed it a bit like, why should I work on this when I'm so close to finishing other projects? So at first it was a bit of like a forcing myself not to work on it because I was really enjoying it. And then eventually it just gets easier with time to just leave a project lying somewhere. But I am hoping to pick this up again soon because it's something that I can still get wear out of in September and October, and I think that'd be really nice. And so far it's been really fun to knit, even though it is a lot of purling. I actually quite like purling every now and then. I like the change. And we'll just see how the project feels once I've finished it and how the yarn is. Whether I want to use the yarn again, make another one. I really want to make the sweater as well. I just think it's a really nice design. But that was something I started a while ago and haven't made all that much progress on. Something that I started relatively recently and have made a lot of progress on because I'd like to have it finished and so I can take it on my holiday, is the French Market Bag by Petite Knit. So the recommended yarn is by Isea. It's like a flat it's called like a paper yarn, but it's just cotton. And this is what I've got so far. I'm not using the recommended yarn. I'm using an equivalent one by, I have no idea if you pronounce the shop name like this, but this is how I pronounce it, Ströne Gröne. So we have one, maybe two stores in Vienna, not in the most convenient locations, but I think, did I get this there? Or did I get this in Germany? Or in the UK? I can't remember. I know it's from that store. And I bought 3 skeins of it. Now it is a little bit thicker than the original yarn. So in the original pattern, Petite Knits hold 3 strands of this yarn. I'm only holding 2. And I've already worked through my first 2 skeins, and I'm now on the 3rd one where I'm pulling from the middle and from the outside. And I've almost reached the length that I want for this bag. So I did make the choice to make it a bit bigger, because I kind of looked at the pictures and the measurements and was like, I think I'm going to want a slightly bigger bag. So I did slightly more increases to make it a bigger bag, and just kind of calculated what repeat I need, like number of stitches I need to make the pattern repeat work, and then increased to that number, and then just started the working the like lace sort of pattern as written. And I'm now at the length it's meant to be, but you measure from like the bottom here, and obviously I've got more length in the bottom because I've made it bigger. So now I want to make the whole thing a little bit taller, because otherwise I'd have a really wide bag, but it'd be very like short. So I think I'm going to try and make it 5 centimeters longer, which won't take too long. And then I'll kind of get a feel for it again, and hopefully that will be enough. If not, I'll knit a few more rounds, and then there's just an I-cord at the top. Then I need to sew a lining. I've got fabric for that in my stash. And then the only thing left to do is put straps on it, and I was just going to try and find some in a shop, either in the town I live in or go into Vienna. But my mum actually has the leather straps that Petite Knit herself actually sells, and she said that I can have them. So she's made this bag already, and with the recommended yarn, and she bought 2 pairs of the straps, so she said I can have the other one, which is really nice. So I'll bring that, hopefully like finished except the straps, to Ireland, and then I'll just have to sew them on by hand, which I'll have to do anyway, because I think even the lining to the bag has to be done by hand, because I don't think I want to risk using the sewing machine for that. But yeah, it's been quite fun to knit. The base was easier to do because it was just stocking it in the round and increasing. This kind of lace-ish kind of pattern is easy to do. It's just not always the easiest to work, especially with multiple strands, but I have enjoyed it and I have gotten through it quite quickly. It's been a nice small project to just kind of pick up whenever I want to, and yeah, I should be able to also finish that this week. So I've got a lot of things that I'm hoping to finish by the end of the week, but I also don't think it should be a problem. Something that I also started recently is a small little shawlette, I guess you'd say. When like my parents mentioned flying to Ireland and, you know, it being my birthday present, the first thing I kind of thought of, well, other than being very excited, was when I still lived in the UK, I had ordered some yarn from Irish Artisan Yarns, and I made a Oslo hat using 2 strands of, I think it's like silk and merino or something like that, in the colour Belfast. And I also bought a single skein of the colourway Cork, because I just fell in love with the colours and the pictures. And since then I wanted to go to Cork because I looked up more pictures of it and it just looked absolutely amazing. And so Cork is on the plan for this trip. And I was like, well, I need to get that skein of yarn out and, you know, make something with it. And because I only have 1 skein, and I was like, I don't want to make socks, and I could make like something like the storm shawl, but I was like, I'm not feeling it. And I then ended up finding a free pattern on Ravelry called A Little Bit Chilly in Copenhagen but I'm calling this pattern a little bit chilly and cork because that's the colorway of the yarn. So this is what the yarn looks like. It is on a merino bamboo silk or something like that. So it has a sheen to it because of the silk, and it's like this greyish colour with a lot of different other colours through it. And I'm not that far yet, but you just work increases every round and have this little like lace pattern in the middle. It's just garter stitch. And the only reason I haven't worked on this more is because these needles are awful. I knew this, but all my other 3mm needles are being used in other projects. So the cable is fine. It's the fact that, so they're Knit Pro needles, interchangeable, but the 3mm, they're just a little bit too thin. And so the join here isn't smooth at all. It's so bad. Yarn gets caught in it so badly, and it just doesn't make it enjoyable to knit when you have to like push the stitches over and you just feel it like getting caught. And I don't want to, you know, rip the yarn because I think it's beautiful. And so I just haven't picked it up because it's not enjoyable to knit with because of these needles. So once I finish some other projects, one of them is the Luasc. That's on 3mm needles. Then I can use those instead and put on a different like cable and everything as well. And then it should be easy going. And I don't think I'll finish this 4-island, but it can be the project that I bring with me, especially because I'll then be using wooden needles. This would be really nice plain knitting because the repeat in the middle here that you do is over 4 rounds, so it's easy to remember the whole thing, and it's not always just the same thing every round. So I really like the pattern so far, and I've got a couple of other like single skeins of yarn where I'm not sure what to do with it, and it's something quite like special and beautiful and not something I want to use for socks. And so if I do finish this soon and get some decent wear out of it, I could see quite a few more of these in my future. And maybe, you know, change it up. I'm not always the biggest fan of how garter looks. With this, I do think it's nice, because otherwise I'd be worried that I would maybe get some crazy pooling and it could distract from the lace in the middle. But with a more like single coloured yarn, it might be nice to go for stockinette, even though it means a lot of purling. But yeah, it's always nice finding a free pattern, and that will just be one of the projects I bring with me to Ireland. Speaking of shawls, so I have wanted to make this shawl since the end of 2019, when I first met Georgie at Yorkshire Yarn Fest. I think it was October, November, and she was wearing this particular shawl in her camel silk yarn, and I just fell in love with it and was like, I need to make this at some point. And it was from Liner Magazine issue 5, and I have not been able to get my hands on that magazine. You can buy the patterns individually, but because there's more than one pattern from that magazine I want to make, I was like, it doesn't make sense to spend the money on the individual pattern, because I'm going to spend way more than if I just bought the magazine, even full price, all the years later. And Liner Magazine doesn't republish the magazines, so I think they might have multiple prints for one issue during like the release before the next one. But eventually they lose the rights to the patterns and can't then release the magazine again, even as a PDF. So the only option is if someone who owns the copy is willing to sell it, or if a smaller kind of store still manages to kind of have a couple of copies. And so Liner actually on their Instagram page wrote, is there anyone who like owns a shop or has their own like personal copies of the magazines that it would be willing to sell to people, to comment below so that people can then, you know, get in contact. And there are quite a few places in Canada, I think some in the States as well, and I'd seen them online. They're the only places where I found the magazine online, but I'd be paying more for shipping than the magazine. And so I was always like, I'm going to hold out just a little bit longer. And then looking through this post, I was like, oh, okay, it's the same thing again. Like, the few places in the EU didn't have issue 5 that I wanted. And then a woman posted that she's based in Italy and she has a couple of issues and can put them online. And I was like, please. And she had issue 5, and she also had a copy of issue 1, which I didn't have. And I really enjoy Liner magazine and have kind of just accepted it's the magazine where I will buy every copy. I also enjoy things like Pom Pom and Making Stories, but they're ones where I'm like, I will dip in whenever I want them. But Liner, every issue has to be. And so it's nice to be able to like fill the back catalogue. I think I'm still missing 2 older issues, but they seem to be available online and I just haven't got around to buying it yet. I'm like, let's not rush it. But I finally got my hands on issue 5 of Liner magazine, so I can now knit the Adrift shawl. It is a relatively simple shawl, but there is a difference between seeing the pictures and seeing it in person. And Georgie used her camel silk yarns. It was even more beautiful and oh, love it. So I finally have the pattern and I finally, as soon as the magazine started, wound up the yarn. Started because I was like, I'm not waiting any longer. I've waited since 2019. And I've had other yarn in stash for this particular shawl. Yeah, that's right. I bought yarn for a pattern I didn't even own and couldn't really buy at the time because I refused to buy the individual copy. And I actually ended up casting on with yarn that I got in October when I went to the UK for Yarndale. And I was staying with Georgie and Ben for a little while, who are the dyers behind the Fibre Fox, and of course I had to get some yarn while I was there. So I got 2 skeins of this colourway. So beautiful. And it's part of the Witcher collection. I think the colour's called Vesemir. I think. I'm now struggling to remember. It's been a while since I've watched The Witcher. I think that's what it's called. It will be written down below anyway. So I have 2 skeins of this. This is on the Merino Mohair singles. So I'm normally not a huge fan of singles, but because this has mohair in it, it has like way more of a halo and it's so beautiful. And maybe not the best choice for this particular pattern because it is a bit textured, but I don't care. I'm loving it, even if you can't really see much. So this is what I have so far. It's not a lot. It's got some garter sections, it's got these eyelet sections, it has a double moss section, and you kind of just repeat all of those. So I'm on another garter stitch section, but to be honest, you can kind of pick up the textures there. Because this is a variegated yarn, probably isn't the best for the pattern, but I'm loving it, and I don't care. I'm just so happy to finally be able to knit this. And yeah, I made a lot of progress the first few days and then was kind of, back down to reality and was like, Nina, you have other projects you need to finish. You can knit on this later, but now, don't need to be scared that you're never going to knit it. You've got it. So I haven't worked on it in a while recently, but once I've got some other things off my needles, I'll be able to focus on this one a lot more. And I'm excited to. Then socks. 2 pairs of socks, actually. The first one, Colourwork socks, hence the big bag of lots of different colours. So I can't even remember when this came out. A few months ago now, the newest Zelda game came out on Nintendo Switch, and I have been waiting for this game and bought it when it came out. I was like, I have loved Zelda since I was young. Really enjoyed Breath of the Wild, and then was like, Tears of the Kingdom. Can't wait. Give it to me. And then spent like the first few days after it came out not really knitting because all I wanted to do was play. And it takes a lot for me to stop knitting. And at the same time as the release of the game, the same designer who did the Stardew Valley socks released some Zelda socks. So they're called Socks of the Hero. And there's 2 versions. So like with the Stardew where you got, obviously it was like 4 separate patterns. You had different designs. With this one, you get both designs within one. And you can either, make matching pairs, either Link or Zelda, or what I'm going to do, one of each. Have a Link sock and have a Zelda sock. So that's what I'm going to do. And I have started. First of all, going through my stash and finding all the colours was so satisfying. Most of the yarn I had in stash, I think it was only these 2 purples that I had to buy. And this is Arveta Classic. I love using it for colourwork socks. I think it's amazing. And then I did also have to buy, and this was the hard one, there was a particular colour that you needed to use for the sword that's on Link's sock, so the Master Sword. It's like a royal sort of blue-purple colour. I had nothing like it in my stash. I couldn't find it anywhere. I tried with Arveta Classic. It was either too blue, too purple. It wasn't happening, and I was going to just give up and use what I had. Until I found a skein of yarn by Cascade on the Heritage base, I think, which is a sock base, and is the perfect colour. I don't have it in this bag. It's in my room. I don't know why it's not in here, but I will show it in the future when I actually get to that part, because I haven't gotten very far with these socks. I was really enthusiastic at the beginning, and then I got distracted by actually playing the game. So I have already made a single change. So I finished the cuff. This green is beautiful. And I've just started the color work at the bottom. I've done like 3 rounds. Very little. And you were meant to, like, you can see I've got a stockinette section of the dark green. You were actually meant to do in a red yarn. You were meant to do hearts. But I chose not to do that because you only have it like on one side of the sock. And I was like, I'll just duplicate stitch that later because it's way too much work and way too much yarn to carry that all the way around. So later on I'll have to duplicate stitch this on. And yeah, I'm really excited for how this is going to turn out. And the Zelda sock, because I'm only making a single one, is more of the like purple tones. You'll have seen it in the picture. I'm trying to match it as best as I can without having to buy like a load of yarn. So I really did as much as possible, went for stash yarn, and then just filled in the gaps where I really couldn't make it work because the colours wouldn't have had enough contrast, or I literally didn't have a colour that would have worked at all. And I kind of felt like with the Master Sword, it is such a distinct colour. And I was like, if I don't get that right, the whole thing's just not going to look right. So I ended up buying those 2 50-gram skeins and then a 100-gram skein. And I do like that colour, so I'll find use for it elsewhere. Or, you know, who knows? I have a lot of friends who like Zelda. Maybe we're all going to get, you know, Link socks. Not Zelda socks. We want the Link socks. But I'm doing both. And maybe in the future I also decide, you know, I actually want a matching pair. And I might, you know, then go back and make another Link, make another Zelda. But we'll see. And then the last project I have to share today is also something new. They're all new. And it's a pair of socks. Ooh. So once again, just kind of had a moment with looking through my yarn stash and feeling inspired, but then also, you know, finding a couple of those skeins of sock yarn where I was like, oh, I tried making socks with you and I hated the experience, didn't like how they looked, and I'm just not interested in trying again. But then I remembered that I had a pattern by Albina McLaughlin. Can you tell her patterns? They're incredible. For a pair of kind of like thicker mild socks called the Thrifty Marla socks. Now, in some ways, when you look at the pattern, it's like you don't really have to buy it. Just because it's, you know, 2 skeins of fingering yarn held together to give you a thicker gauge. And you can knit it cuff down, toe up, however you want to. Instructions are included for both. But I'm really glad I did buy the pattern because she includes a lot of sort of like inspiration for what kind of yarn you can use to get different effects. She also has a specific PDF for Newton, how you can like make socks using Newton. And I have been loving knitting these socks. I've already got one finished. Now it looks huge. I do have big feet, not this big, but that's just because it's currently scrunching up and being drawn lengthwise, and I also made them a little bit longer so that when this yarn felts, the socks will still fit, because I do kind of want these to be like more like hiking or like walking socks for within my boots. And the yarn that I used are 2 different skeins of Grundel Socken, Grundel sock yarn. So you can see the 2 colors here. So this one's more like blue, purple, a bit of blue, bit of green and orange. And this currently looks very red and tones like that, but there's actually a lot of grey, light grey, medium grey, and dark grey. And by holding them together, yes, you get, you cycle through the colour of like the orange to purple to kind of blue, but you also then get the change with the other yarn, and it's just so cool. I think how they've worked up way better than I would have had if I just used one single skein, because I tried making a pair of socks with this yarn and I hated how they looked. But yeah, work together, it goes much quicker. I did a toe up, so I can kind of use quite a bit of yarn. And I've now created something that I'm going to get a lot of wear out of, and that I've loved making out of 2 skeins of yarn that I'd sort of given up hope on. And I'm on the second one now. So you can see they're not matching at all. I did not attempt to make them matching at all, because I was like, I don't want the work. And you can't really see it, but I have placed the yarn for the afterthought heel, and I'm now starting on the ribbing of the leg. So I'm like here currently, and I'll probably be able to finish this in a day or 2, then quickly do the heel. And you can see I pulled from the inside of the skeins for the heel, so it would be very different. And I'm really glad I did, because I think it's just fun. So with blocking and with wear, they will fit. I know they will. But currently it's just a bit. Yeah, so I'll probably, if I don't finish them today, I'll probably finish them tomorrow or the day after. Like, it's not going to take me very long. They're really enjoyable to knit. And I started with Magic Loop, but once I finished the toe increases, I switched to these Addy Sockenwunder needles, because I didn't have, for my Chiagus, I think I didn't have a cable available because I've got too many things on my needles, and I had these in the correct size. I'm using 3mm, and they've been actually really nice to use. I didn't like them the first few times I used them. I prefer the Chiagus, I still do, but I've kind of settled into how to hold these as well. And I normally always do cuff down socks. That is how I started knitting socks. That is how I've always enjoyed knitting socks. But with this pattern, I was like, no, let's go for toe up. And I'm starting to realize toe up socks really help me to finish socks, because I love doing the toe. The toe is my favorite thing to do on a sock. And getting to do that first means like, it's so fun. Oh, I'm so excited. And then the fact that you already have like the foot out of the way, and then you get to do the ribbing, which I quite enjoy for the cuff. But then when I finish the first one, the first thing I get to do is the toe. So I immediately started the second one because I wanted to do the toe again. And it's just, I've noticed that it's so much quicker to get through socks. Now, it might also just be because I haven't done socks in a while, especially on a thicker needle, thicker gauge. But I'm willing to test that out. I've got some yarn where I'd like to try and make the Humleby socks. Finally, I've been kind of wanting to do them for a while. And yeah, I still think like cuff down is going to be my go-to, but I think if there is a toe up version for a pattern, I think I might try and do that more often. Or even just using like scrap yarn that I have, just start casting on with a colour and work the toe until it's reached the right, width, and then make socks that way with an afterthought heel. And not have to, think about things at all. I do like how a heel flap and gusset fits more than an afterthought heel, or even a fish lips kiss or any other short row heel, but I have sort of fixed some of the issues by doing extra rounds before I start doing the decreases for the heel. So that has helped, but heel flap and gusset, toe up, not keen on that. I've done it once, didn't like it. So we'll see how my adventure continues with toe up socks, but I've always enjoyed them. I've just never been drawn to them like I have with this, because I don't think I've ever done toe up and an afterthought heel. Love it. Really love it. Because you can do the heel at any point. Like, I can now say that I've done, you know, these couple of centimeters. I'm like, I feel like doing the heel. Pick it up and do it. So, loving them. And I can see many more pairs of these socks. So, like I said, there's also a PDF for Newton. I am definitely going to look through my stash and pick out some Newton bits. And I might even bring that to Ireland with me, because I think they'll be nice to work on. And just wind little balls and just, you know, use what I have. So that's everything. It's a lot. I am hoping, depends on how it all goes, I've got a couple of things that I'm hoping to finish this week. And if everything goes to plan, my week this week is mainly just kind of getting things sorted for Ireland. So I'm I've got a bit more time. So I'm hoping to finish these projects, still be able to like pack everything, and then maybe over the weekend I can film one more video showing off the things I finished before I leave. We'll see. I'm not sure if I'm gonna film it all when I'm in Ireland, maybe, but maybe I don't end up sharing it. But either way, I will probably, well, I know I'm coming home with some yarn. I've already got some of it planned. But either you'll see one more video before the trip, or you'll see me after the trip. And maybe I'll be a changed woman. Maybe I'll just be like, I have found my country. Or maybe I won't like it at all. Who knows? I'm trying not to get my hopes up, but I'm so excited. Oh, and I hope it rains. I hope it rains, and I hope it's windy, and all I would ask for is one day where it's sunny for a short little while. Just to see, like, the ocean and the greenery, clouds, blue sky, sun, and then it can rain again. I love the rain. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching. This was a longer one. I had a lot to get through. I feel like I also rushed it a bit, but that was mainly just because I was excited to talk about all the things. Like always, if you have questions or want to know anything, just put it down below. I do have to say I haven't been as active on Instagram. I've kind of just come to a point where I know there's a lot of talk about like hating the algorithm. Nothing like that for me. It's literally just, I've reached a point where like I'm so inspired by my own yarn stash and my own ideas that I currently don't want to be tempted by buying new things, like seeing beautiful yarn that I want to buy and not wanting to be tempted by new patterns coming out. And I currently just want to ride this wave of my stash inspiring me, like with these socks, and then using the patterns that I have. And it's easier if I don't look at Instagram as often, because then I'm not tempted to buy new things or, you know, want to cast on new things. So I am a little less active on Instagram, so if I haven't responded to any of your messages, I'm sorry. I do appreciate you've reached out and contacted me. And I'm also just being much slower with comments on YouTube as well, so please bear with me. And yeah, Instagram is probably going to be quicker than YouTube, because every time I do go on Instagram, I have like the notifications. Whereas on YouTube, I only really see the comments if I go on like the YouTube studio kind of section. But yes. Anyway, we'll stop now. I need to take a break. I've spoken so much and so quickly. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!